Then the politics got in for the football rodeo, and they were $200 million over because the county got in, and the county's dirty and all that. Start collecting these dollars. We acted like a private entity, building our own private stadium. The deal was $500 million. And they said, Bob, you got the team, but it's $800 million. October 5th, 1999, Bob was awarded the NFL team. Then tried to take every day, every person you meet, every project you take on, every job you have, try to push yourself to that ultimate job.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode. Before we get started, I do have an announcement. We will be rebranding, so it will no longer be called the Vision Podcast, and we are transitioning to the new name for Houston Media. So with that being said, enjoy the interview. A seasoned veteran with over 45 years of professional media experience, this gentleman has worked media and public relations with years of experience, helping people and organizations share their stories effectively. He's worked with politicians, businesses, and individuals to build strong public images and handle tough situations. This gentleman has covered numerous Super Bowls, NBA Finals, NCAA Final Fours, World Series, Wimbledon, U.S. Open, Championship Boxing, the Indy 500, the Kentucky Derby, the Masters Golf Tournament, and much more. My personal favorite, he's also been part of the team that acquired the National Football League's 32nd franchise, the Houston Texans, in the successful sports stadium referendum in 1996. In 1997, he helped pass state legislation, which created sports authorities throughout the state. Then in 98, he was hired by Sports Authority and helped lead all phases of architecture, engineering, construction, bonding of the media relations for the government in relation to baseball and the football stadiums here in Houston. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the Duelist High legend and blessed to say my mentor, Chris Begala.
Good to be here. Appreciate it. For Houston Media. So I would say I'm for Houston Media. So love the branding and look forward to our conversation.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you for coming on to the show today. Hopefully you guys that are listening can take action into what Chris is saying because he's been in this industry. So you'd be a fool not to take what he's saying and apply it to your guys' careers. I want to set some expectations before we start on with the show. We're here to understand Chris's personal experience, to gather purpose in the field of communications through business, sports, and politics, and then turn it into a business. That way you guys can feel fulfillment in your career, and then you guys can make some money at the end of the term. We know all the great things that you've accomplished. Let's rewind the tapes, go back in time. Let's see what you did. I know you started at KIKK Radio when you were about 14 and a half, 15 years old. Talk to us about how a kid a kid at that moment knew exactly what he wanted, and then, to tell your parents, hey, pick me up from the station, I'm working. It's pretty bold of you.
It started as a kid, all I cared about was sports. That was it. And I was a good athlete. And looking back, I think it helped as well because it gave me good reasons to say no. Not that I probably would have gotten into trouble as a young kid, but the thought of touching a cigarette or drink or anything like that, and you're 12, 13, 14, I wasn't brave and good and all that to say no. There's nothing on this planet that I would partake in if it had one iota of a negative effect on me being able to be an athlete. So that was easy. So sports was a good way to say no to. I want to say that to a lot of people. And so I was a good athlete. And best sports probably as it panned out, baseball, tennis, and soccer. And a hockey player moved in next door when I was a kid. And all I did was I was unabashed and not scared, and I started bugging him, knocking on his door, can I walk your dog, mow your lawn? Turns out that I was just lucky. He was a super, super young man, individual. His name was Terry Ruskowski. And Terry was playing for the then Houston Aeros. And I started bugging him. I was lucky that he was just such a good person. When I was a kid, I thought he was older. He was like 21, 22 years old. Okay. What does he care about some punk 14-year-old kid next door? He was like an older brother, father. And he took me in. He started taking me all the practices. I met Gordie Howe, who was the greatest hockey player in the world before Wayne Gretzky. I met all those guys. He took me to games, and of course, I thought he was fantastic. When my dad and mom would travel out of town, I'd stay at his house. So, it was really, really cool. He was a super guy. And among other things, I saw a few things, but I remember one day we were at his pool, and there were two other players there. This is way before cell phones and, texting and all that stuff. They pick up the phone, and they called some girl, and about an hour and a half later, there were three girls in the pool. They were topless, and I'm 14 and a half going, these are the coolest people on planet Earth, right? It's just nuts.
How old are you at this point?
14 and a half or so. So I was just, wow. So needless to say, I thought Terry was the coolest guy in the world, but he kept his eye on me. He threatened me if I ever did anything wrong. I mean, in a good way. So I was very fortunate. If he wasn't a good person, I could have, found myself in trouble. To the contrary, he did a lot. So I started going to all these games, practices, and stuff, and then I started bugging all the sports reporters because I love sports, and I thought, why not, give that a shot? Started bugging them all. Terry ends up talking to one of them, a guy named Barry Warner, who was the sports director at KIKK Radio. Maybe if you're older, you'll remember. But Kick Radio was the dominant radio station in this whole region. They were an absolute juggernaut. Right now, KODA, I think, is number one in this region, 6.5, 7s they get. Kick was getting 20s, mid-20s, 5-6 times the listenership at times. So Terry Ruskowski tells Barry Warner, take this kid on. Long story short, July 78, I go to the radio station, and after that, I just started doing more and more and more. And then I was part-time, and then I was full-time. The only problem was I didn't have a driver's license, so I would hitchhike to the radio station, out of a nice community, Quail Valley, and I knew they would do that, but some mom would stop. What are you doing? Oh, I need to get here. She would take me to the radio station, Hillcroft and 59, and then after the game, do the interviews, do the tape, all that stuff, be 11 o'clock, and then my mom, my dad, or one of my brothers or sister would have to go pick me up. They weren't happy about that, but I figured as long as I'm there, someone has to get me. So that went on for over a year. They did not like me, but I didn't care because I was going to get there. So I hitchhiked and then caught rides back. And it just opened up opportunities, clearly, that not very many people anywhere near that age would have. But Barry Warner and Kick were open to it. I started to prove myself. Then I started chasing tape for ABC, AP, UPI, which is getting interviews, and then you edit them and send them out to those entities. ABC paid very well. AP, UPI paid $5 a cut. Nothing. But you send them 4 or 5, and 5-6 days a week, it adds up. But then Kick put me on part-time, excuse me, and then Kick had me full-time. So I was full-time at the top-rated radio station in the city before I had a driver's license. I had a health care plan, a dental plan. I don't have a dental plan today, but I had a dental plan before I had a driver's license. So it was unique, but it was really something else. And it was a great ride all the way through up to my freshman year in college. And it was crazy. I mean, I can tell you what, when I was like junior, senior in high school, buddies of mine would play this game all the time. We'd be at the rodeo, or we'd walk into Untold to get a Slurpee. They would go, do you know Chris Begala Kick Sports? You ever heard that? Yeah. Every single person they asked, cab driver, waiter, anybody. And I'm not saying that, that makes me special, but that gives you an idea of just how powerful Kick Radio was. There wasn't a door in this entire city that wasn't open to me. I mean, I was getting into clubs when I was 16, drinking age, forget it. Urban Cowboy came out. I went to the world premiere of Urban Cowboy, met John Travolta, met the woman who played his girlfriend in the movie. I was much more excited about meeting her than Travolta. For sure. Pam, right? Beautiful woman. But those are the kind of things that I had a chance to do. Met, all these famous athletes, and I enjoyed it. I was good at it, and it opened up doors. So it was, I guess, how did it start? I was just bold enough or not scared enough to bug people. And the people that I bugged, I was very lucky that they helped me out. And then after that, you prove yourself.
For sure. So it sounds like having a mentor, especially early in your career, 14, 15 years old, I always tell a lot of people to have somebody that's in your specific industry, in your space, someone you can look up to help guide you. So for those people, students, people that are starting to begin in this space, maybe that don't have those connections, what would you recommend for them to do?
It's a good question, and I fully embrace mentorship on all levels in life. If you're religious, seek mentors in that area. Obviously, depends upon what denomination you are. But in business, whether you're 13 or 30, I think mentors are critically important. So reach out. There is a little bit of a risk there because you don't know who you're reaching out to. You could find yourself, involved with somebody who then gets in trouble. That's the negative side. But of course, that's life. There's always a risk. But yes, I fully embrace that, and I think people can gain so much. I look back, and I was incredibly fortunate that a guy like Terry Ruskowski, he's 22 years old. At the time, he's making $200-something a year. He's running around having the time of his life. The last thing on his mind was some punk neighbor who wanted to walk his dog or mow his lawn. I just got lucky that Terry was a very good person. And then I jump into Kick Radio, and I can't tell you. Of course, I was a novelty because I was like the kid, so everybody liked me off the bat, but they were interested. Every single person I came in contact with at Kick Radio was helpful, was valuable, and then you reach out and you start meeting other media people, you start meeting other athletes, and always, of course, I was the youngest around. So generally, people want to help. So I completely embrace that, and I encourage anybody, depending whether you're 13 or 30, as I said, seek out mentors, try to learn. Don't overly pester, but you got to pester to a degree, and the direction and the information it can give somebody is invaluable.
For sure. And so how intentional do you truly have to be in order to get to the top and be at a senior platform?
That's a wide-ranging question. It's a broad question. It's a good one, though. There's an old adage, and it sounds trite, but it's true. Figure out what you love, and then try to find a way to make a living off of it. Of course, that's big picture, and it might be trite, but there's a lot to that. I always give people advice too. They come to me, and I always start with it with a real simple, similar to what I just said, but I also say, think in your mind right now, what is the perfect job, the perfect dream job of your entire life? Think about that. If you may or may not know that, but if you know what it is, then try to take every day, every person you meet, every project you take on, every job you have, try to push yourself to that ultimate job. You may get there, or you may get a little bit sidetracked into something that you love and find something that you can maybe make a career out of. But if you're going towards that goal and you're focused on it, it's taking you somewhere closer to where you want to go. So extracurricular activities, hobbies, you could say do what you want, take up golf, what have you. But that also includes networking and being out there, being aggressive socially, trying to meet a lot of different people, remembering who they are. And in this day and age, it's very easy with text and email. Follow up. Enjoyed meeting you, Mr. Palmer. My name is Joe Smith. If you ever remember me, blah, 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 thanks. Boom, real quick. George Herbert Walker Bush, the 41st president of the United States, who I was honored to be able to work for many, many, many years. Think of this. For about 40, 50 years of his life, he wrote a personal handwritten note to every single person he met. Now, y'all's lazy asses sitting at home, think about that. Y'all probably never wrote a handwritten note in your life.
Say it again. What did he do?
George Herbert Walker Bush, the 41st president of the United States, went 45 to 50 years of his life, think of this, writing a handwritten letter to every single person he met.
That's
You know,
insane.
you talk about determination, you talk about persistence. He did it because he wanted to be the president of the United States of America, but he's also a great person. And I'm honored to have received many handwritten notes from him. But think of this yourself. Y'all are sitting there at home. Heck, I don't know what your demographic is on this, and I'm not attacking, I'm having fun a little bit, but I'll bet you 10% of your audience has written a handwritten note in their bloody life. Think of that, how easy it is to text or email somebody you meet. Just, we're kind of bouncing around here, but just as an example, look at George Bush, and then think of yourself, how you could maybe network a little better, reach out, people might remember you, all of those things. So extracurricular activities, yeah, that's fine. Networking is great, but, just be genuine. Be yourself, and don't be afraid to ask, but don't over-ask. You get into mentors. You find yourself around successful people. It's just like friends, The more successful people you're around, I think the more successful you'll be. And that's where luck gets into it. And, the harder you work, the luckier you get. The great golfer Ben Hogan used to say that. And he goes, yeah, it's funny. The harder I work, the luckier I get. So there's a lot to that.
And I can agree to that. So transitioning on to college, you went to U of H. I currently go there right now. But you graduated with a degree in Bachelor of Arts in Communications as well as Political Science. So for people that want to get into PR, social relations, media relations, what would you recommend them to take going into school? Do you see the field kind of changing? Should you change your major compared to what you did? Could you give us a little insight on what students can take in order to reach their goals?
Sure. If anybody out there, students in particular, have a goal of wanting to get into media communications, go for it. But I will say this, that sector is shrinking, and it's shrinking rapidly. However, there's so many different new avenues, just like what we're doing here. There are so many other opportunities, right? So I don't want to dissuade anyone and say, don't get into media and communications. It's very different, though. So my suggestion is try to get some good, solid, high-end experience, and the only way that's generally going to occur is if you can give of your time for free. And if you can do that and get in the door somewhere, somehow, newspaper, internet, TV, radio, magazine, internet magazine, what have you. If you can get in the door and you can get some experience, it's going to give you a big advantage, resume enhancer. It's also going to give you an opportunity to figure out, hey, maybe this isn't exactly what I want to do. I learned a lot, and maybe I'm going to take a different tack and go into a different category. So I would say try to put yourself in a position. I know it's tough because bills are out there, and a lot of people don't have daddy and mommy paying all your bills, so it's hard. But if you can somehow carve out a summer, carve out 3 days out of the week where you can work for free, get in the door somewhere. That gives you some opportunity. And in your classes, if you're going to do media communications, I implore everybody, take as many writing classes as you can. Nobody knows how to write anymore. And that's short form and long form. And again, I'm not just some old man, cranky talking. I'm telling you, I work for some of the most brilliant businessmen and women in this region. Nobody knows how to write. So take as many writing classes as you can. With all of the technology, everything that's going on, writing will never get out of style. And, some of the things that I do, I always kid my friends or what have you, the technology is changing, but I always say, hey, guess what's never going to change? Brand, reputation, and ego. That ain't never going to go out of style. And when somebody's brand and their ego and their reputation is at stake, I can help. But I'm telling you, take as many writing classes as you possibly can. My son's in law school. I say take everything. Of course, you have to take all the mandatory classes, but take as much writing as you can. It's an art. It's so valuable. It'll never go out of style. No matter what you do, no matter where you are, learn how to write.
Okay. Well, how do you feel about ChatGPT and like it being inserted into the media in today's world compared to if you were just to naturally write, taking all these courses?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course, somebody out there who knows a lot more about the latest technology can say, well, this Begala guy doesn't know what he's talking about because AI can write for me. Yes, that's true to a degree. Maybe it's true now, but not completely and totally. There's no AI that's going to be able to drill down into a homemaker who has, and I'm talking about like someone who builds homes for a living and sells them, who has a massive class action lawsuit against them. You can't just push a button and have press releases and statements and all that pop up through AI. I don't think so. Can you today, through today's technology? You're talking about working with legal counsel, with their PR people, with the owner, and somebody like Begala McGrath, my company, comes in and assists. Yes, there are all sorts of tools out there, and I'm one who embraces them. I'm not, some old guy who says, oh, everything's terrible. No, I'm all for everything that can help the client, that can help that end user. But I don't think that technology and AI offers a complete soup to nuts in relation to everything. It's still very important to be able to know the client, know the issue, know media, anticipate, and be able to walk clients through situations and then also through writing statements, releases, etc.
So do you feel like if you were growing up in kind of my time right now, growing up in college, do you believe you'd be using ChatGPT, putting some of your thought into what you're going to write, but then copying over your initial thoughts and then pasting it into chat and seeing how you can develop the statement?
Sure. I mean, I think yes, of course. I have a niece who writes for the University of Texas at San Antonio's newspaper. And she writes articles, and they run them through. And then also in class, too, she's writing articles, and teachers have come up and said, hey, this came up under this AI. I think you might have been plagiarizing. Not a word did she plagiarize. So there's nothing that's guaranteed, right, with that. But to answer your question, yes, I would want myself, my company, and my clients to benefit from every piece of technology that's out there. If it's ChatGPT, great. If it's some other format, some other entity that can help, absolutely.
I understand you. So now putting it all together, you mentioned how you get noticed by major networks by networking yourself into working for free, things like that. But once you get into the door, they've offered you a job. You see athletes like Tom Brady, Cristiano Ronaldo. They prepare for a chance to try again, try for the next year, to be on the team the next year, to compete for a championship. Where did you see yourself, the better way to ask it is, how did you prepare for work on any given week?
It's a good question. When I was a kid reporting, I knew my stuff. I did, and I worked hard, and I had prepared myself, and enjoyed doing that. One of the most fascinating people I ever met and worked with was Pete Rose, just passed away a while ago. Baseball's all-time hit leader. The single most intense human being I ever met in my life. He was a psycho, but I really enjoyed Rose. He would show up, we would be out there and be preparing to put our desk up and setting up to do our talk show 3.5 hours before first pitch. Nobody's out there. Maybe grounds crew, maybe one or two. Pete Rose would show up 3 hours before, T-shirt and a bat in his hand, just pacing and looking for anybody to talk to. I went out and started talking to him every time he came into town. Of course, he'd break and maybe walk away and talk to another ball player or two. But about an hour and a half, 2 hours, I'd talk with Rose every single day he was in town. He was so intense. And after a game, you go in and do, I loved this about Pete Rose. You go and you do an interview with Rose. Let's say, for example, he got the winning hit in the 7th inning. 1 out, 1 man on. So Rose would have a gaggle of reporters around him. When I went in there, I was prepared. But this is what Rose would do. And most people would say, what a jerk. No, I love it. You go to Pete Rose, let's say, for example, 7th inning, 1 out, he got the game-winning hit. So the question is, okay, Pete, tell us about the hit in the 7th inning and won the game. Pete would look at him and say, what was the count? What was the pitch? Where was it? 99 out of 100 reporters have no bloody idea, right? And then I don't know. Well, you come in here, he starts yelling at him. You come in here and you interview me, and I'm a professional, and I got the game-winning hit. You don't even know what the count was. You don't even know what the pitch is. Excuse me. You're terrible at what you do. Now, of course, most people are going to say, what a jerk. I love that. He is being genuine. Of course, he's a psycho and the most intense person, but that's what made him the best hitter in the history of the game. Base hitter. The most hits in the history. So when he said that, I jump in and go, there's a 1-2, it was a curveball outside the right corner. Yes, boom, and then he gives you your answer. Perfect, great answer. I don't know if a lot of people listening or watching right now will say, okay, I agree. But the intensity of that was motivating. It was fascinating. And the same intensity exists with entrepreneurs that I work for, people who are successful. They have that edge. And don't be afraid of that. Embrace it. However, be prepared. It's cool to be able to agree with someone who's intense like that, but what do you say if he or she turns around and says, okay, well, what do you think about that? Oh, no. Okay, well, then you're toast, right? Be prepared. So was I prepared? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was prepared because I loved sports and I knew what was going on. And then, especially when I was a younger sports reporter, I lived with the Houston Oilers, and so they were like my friends, and we went out and partied together, and I knew more about what was going on with the Oilers and then the basketball team, Rockets, and everything than anybody because I was good at what I did, because I loved it. And then the age and my lifestyle, I was single, we went out, we partied, so it was a piece of cake. It was fun. So I knew what was going on better than anybody, and I'm not bragging about that. It just at that time I did. And it was interesting, and it was fun for me. And then I got to a point where I started doing some other work on the side, started doing public relations, did stuff with Houston, did stuff with Pennzoil, who was a sponsor of a lot of my sportscasts, did things with Enron, a few others. And then the more I started doing that, and then I started doing a little project work for the Clinton White House after my brother Paul got President Clinton elected in 92. So that opened up opportunities. And then all of a sudden I thought, you know what? I wake up on a Tuesday morning. I hope Charles Barkley's groin is fine. I hope it's fine. But that didn't get me up and intellectually stimulate me whether Barkley's groin was ready to play tonight. It didn't get me going. And my personality is more of one who wants to be in the arena, like Teddy Roosevelt's famous speech to the Chicago Chamber of Commerce. Who is in the arena? Whose face is marred with the blood and the sweat, right? Who wants to try? It's better to try great deeds and fail multiple times over and over again than to live in that gray twilight which knows neither victory or defeat. It's one of my favorite sayings ever. And Roosevelt, TR's one of my personal favorites. But I guess my point is I was more cut out to be in the middle of what's going on as opposed to talking about what's going on. And that led me to start my own business. And
so you talked about the kind of the mentality of how you prepared. Let's talk about like the technicality of it. I like to say that, your voice is a instrument. You can't use, one key the whole entire time or else people will get bored and no one will watch you. So I feel like when I watch people, when I watch back myself and I play back the tapes, I see myself talking in a monotone. So how did you practice to articulate, use your facial expression, use your instruments to help you guide you during your journey?
Good question. I don't think I was ever blessed with a great voice. I don't think I was. And it depends what you're doing. Are you doing a 3-hour talk show? Are you doing a 30-second sports report? 60 seconds? It all depends. So inflection, pausing, pacing, all of that matters, whether it's 5 seconds or 5 hours. So those things are important, and I think you have to be intellectually honest with yourself and listen to tapes and see where your strong points are and see where your weak points are. I think clearly slowing down is very, very important no matter who you are. Inflection at the right time. Because if you inflect and you all of a sudden start getting high energy at a point where it's not really that impactful, it's foolish. It loses,
the message.
Yeah, it ruins the message, and it loses your audience, whether it's visual or audio. So it's practice, and I think you also have to be yourself. So it's a combination of all that together.
Gotcha. I absolutely love it. So diving into more of your early successes, specifically your involvement in the sports referendums of 1996, Begala worked with the Texans founder and owner, Bob McNair, the Rodeo Sports Authority, and others in the collective effort to procure the Houston Texans. So I remember you telling me a story a few months back in the Mexican restaurant, and I think the audience would love to understand from a sports perspective, from a business perspective, on how that came to be. So do you mind telling us how that adjourned?
No,
And I know you've got a way of telling stories, so don't leave any details out.
Well, all cities and regions have gone through this iteration at some point, right? Which is stadiums for rich billionaire sports owners. How much should the public be paying for that? Is there a benefit for the public to put in $200 million for a $500 million stadium? Is that fair? Those questions and those issues have resonated throughout our entire country. Some cities are in for it. Some decide, no, we're not going to put public dollars, like Los Angeles and Los Angeles County, for example. Depends on your politics. Houston was at a crossroads in the mid to late 90s. Because Bud Adams, the owner of the then Houston Oilers, wanted and needed a new stadium. Bud went to then Mayor Bob Lanier, which was the wrong person to go to, because Bud's stadium needs married with the rodeo, the sidelines, the same stadium that the rodeo needs, football needs. But he went to the city with Mayor Lanier. That didn't work, and then they had a horrible relationship, and it went way back, and Lanier did everything he could to harm Bud Adams. He wasn't going to do anything to help Bud Adams, and that's not where Bud should have gone. So long story short, Bud comes up short there. He hired a guy named Mike McClure, who was his VP, who passed away a little while ago, brilliant businessman, to go out and try around the country, try to get another deal so I can have something that I can have in my hand and negotiate with Houston and say, look, I've got this. Can you guys match it? So Mike went out and got arguably the best stadium deal that had ever existed from Tennessee. Not just the state. Not just the city, Nashville or Memphis, the state. The state guaranteed 30 years of sellouts. Mike McClure got that. The state guaranteed 100% of all revenue, naming rights, everything goes to Bud and the team if he brings the team there. I could go on all the other things that he put. So he gets that deal, comes back to Houston. They said no. So Bud ends up leaving. So our city was sitting here, our region. The basketball owner was a guy named Les Alexander, owned the Rockets. Drayton McClain owned the Astros. Drayton said, I need a new stadium. Les Alexander, the owner of the Rockets, said, I need a new stadium. Bud's gone. The Oilers are gone. So we're all, as a region and a city, we're looking around going, we've lost the NFL, and we're going to lose the Astros and the Rockets too. Oh, my gosh, something has to happen. So Bob Lanier got together with Ken Lay and many other leaders and said, let's see what we can do to put together a public referendum that we can get some dollars towards a baseball and then a football rodeo stadium. Rockets were out. Lanier didn't like Les Alexander. He said, screw you, I'll deal with you later. That's the truth right there. So Les and the Rockets were not in on the first one. So we go up and we put together, I was brought in, we put together a visitor-driven tax, which is hotel, motel, rentals. If you rent a hotel in Houston, buy a hotel room. Part of that goes to the Sports Authority. If you have a car rental of 30 days or less, that goes as well. Those are mostly visitor-driven taxes. We can get those taxes, put it in a bucket, and that'll help pay for baseball stadium and then a football rodeo. So we took that to the people, and we won by like 1%. We got the word in at like 1:20 a.m., and we won in November 96. So there we had the public funding for baseball and then football rodeo if we could get an NFL team. So that's when the Sports Authority came into being, and then we started working, building the baseball stadium, and then working to get the NFL team. So we're all sitting around, and we're just getting started. Sports Authority had an amazing board, and they were just getting started. All across the country, these things are political. And when politics get in, you get terrible, terrible decisions, and you waste money. These stadiums are going 100, 150 million over budget. Terrible. Since it was just starting in Houston and Harris County, the board that was put together by then County Judge Robert Eccles and then Mayor Lee Brown, who was a terrible mayor, but at least he listened to a few people, and at that point, they put together that board of the Harris County Houston Sports Authority. This was a star-studded board with wonderful people. And since we were just getting started, the politics hadn't come into being. So we start collecting these dollars. We acted like a private entity, building our own private stadium. And we were unbelievably on top of things. And it was so exciting. It was so much fun. And we did such an amazing job. We built Enron Field. Then it became Minute Maid, and now it's Dyco. On time, under budget. $1.8 million, under budget. Then the politics got in for the football rodeo, and they were $200 million over because the county got in, and the county's dirty and all that. So that's what happened. But I'll tell you the story that when we started, we had a couple, maybe 2 to 4 billionaires in town that started bugging the Sports Authority. I'm the guy who's going to bring football in. I'm the guy who's going to bring football in. I'm like, wow. So myself and then chairman Jack Raines, there's one way to find out who the NFL wants. We wrote a letter to the commissioner of the NFL, Paul Tagliabue, at the time. This is 98. Dear Commissioner, we're the Harris County Houston Sports Authority. We're the public entity. We're raising public dollars. We're going to build a football rodeo stadium if you give us an NFL team. Do you have somebody right now that you want to designate as the person that you guys are going to work with to get the NFL to Houston? Boom, Bob McNair. I'm not saying we got that for Bob, but right. We made that public. And Tagliabue said Bob McNair. So enter Bob McNair. And then I started working with Bob and the rodeo and the Sports Authority all together to bring the NFL team. And we were successful ultimately. A lot of great stories in between. But October 5th, 1999, Bob was awarded the NFL team. And when he flew out that morning, he called me and the then chairman of the Sports Authority, Billy Burge. He's on his plane. He says, well, today's the day. Guys, I'm going to get the team. Wow. How exciting, Bob. This is unbelievable. Good luck. Get back with us. A couple hours later, he calls. He got the team. Oh, my gosh, it's amazing. Most expensive meeting I've ever had in my life. He walks in, and the deal was $500 million. And they said, Bob, you got the team, but it's $800 million.
Almost double it.
Okay, done. But you get the Super Bowl. Oh, and by the way, the first 2 years, you get no TV money. You get nothing. But you get the Super Bowl, and you get the team for $800 million. Bob's like, done.
That's the biggest revenue stream, right? The TV and everything.
Oh, for sure. The number one with a bullet, nothing close. And they took his TV money for the first 2 years.
Could you also go over the LA, because it was LA versus Houston on who was going to get a team.
Right.
I mean, no brainer. You're picking LA. But how did you guys as a team put together a plan so specific and tailored to Houston where they had to come with us?
Good question, and yes, that's what happened. So the NFL had made a commitment. They didn't have to do it, but they had made a commitment. All the owners had said, we want to get one more team. So it came down to Houston or L.A. And let's be honest, Houston's a great market for football, of course. But Houston at that time was about 5.5 million people in the region. LA's 18.5. So it's a no-brainer. You're going to sell bread, you're going to sell beer, you're going to sell cars. What would you rather have, 18.5 million potential customers or 5.5? No-brainer. But the problem is that we knew, and I spoke to this aggressively and authoritatively, we knew that LA's politics were all screwed up. We had our public money. You think the city of LA is going to pass a referendum for public dollars to a stadium? No way.
Hell no.
Yeah. You think LA County's going to pass it? No. You think the state's going to pass it? No way. So their chance of getting public dollars was practically zero. Now, how do you get a team without any public dollars? Well, you put the money together and you say, well, I'm rich and I'm going to bring the NFL team. Okay, LA politics, LA city politics says come to the Memorial Coliseum, which needed tons of renovation. It's majority African-American politics. It's just the basic want. They're going to say, if you're going to do the NFL, you're going to go to the Coliseum. Well, the Coliseum needs tons of dollars thrown in. Well, if you go outside, it's a private deal. So we met with real rich people in LA and agents and all these people. We went out to LA. We met with the people who said, we're going to bring the NFL team. Well, at the time we did the numbers, and this is 1998, we thought it was about $2.2 to $2.5 billion to do the whole thing. Build your own stadium with no private dollars, get the team, put everything together, $2.5 billion. Well, unless you got $2.5 billion and slap it on the table, it's a pipe dream. And we knew that the NFL knew that. Also, Al Davis was the owner of the LA Oakland Raiders. He's back and forth, and he had sued the NFL, I believe, at that time 5 times and won every single time. So as soon as the NFL, if they were going to get an expansion team, drops it in LA, Al Davis sues the NFL. It's not a slam dunk guarantee he'll win, but he's 5-0 against him. So they know Davis is going to get a lawsuit. They know there's no public dollars. And they know whoever is saying, I'm going to bring the NFL, they have to do it 100% private. Good luck. Good luck. And so we used that, and we went to multiple meetings. We, presented in front of the owners, and one of them was in Kansas City. And LA came in with this gorgeous model and this unbelievable video, and Charlton Heston was the voiceover. He played Moses, right? One of the most beautiful, gorgeous voices, powerful, all that. They had all the glitz and glamour. But our strategy was here. Here's the deal. Y'all go LA, you better have $2.5 billion cash. And you better be ready for Al Davis to sue you and all the other problems that come there. Deal with LA later. Y'all going to put a team there. Now there's 2 teams there. They put them there. We said that. We don't think you're going to go there. However, here's us. We got Bob McNair, who's got all the money. He's got enough money to burn a wet mule. We got the public dollars. We got the architectural engineering. We got the public entity. Everything ready to go, wrapped up in a pretty bow. All you have to do is say, take it. And then worry about LA later. And that's exactly what they did. And we got the team.
I love that story. Every single time I hear it, I've played back clips of our conversation when you told the story. I was like, wow, like that to me, especially growing up in the Texan Stadium, going with my father since 2004, stadium opened in 2002. That story really resonates with me just because I truly love the Houston Texans, and they'll stay with me forever. So,
and a kicker on that too, I'll add this. It's not just clearly the Sports Authority. Bob McNair led, and Bob was very well respected. The rodeo played a major part because the rodeo put money in. The public entity, Sports Authority, played a major part because they put public money in. It was a team effort. We had everything going. And I'll tell you a funny story. After one of our presentations in Kansas City, we're meeting with 31 NFL owners. That's a pretty select group. And very powerful. And after our presentation, the then owner of the Carolina Panthers, a guy named, his name escapes me now. So he comes up and he says, I want to talk to you. Owner, me. Yes, sir. y'all made a good presentation. All that's good. He goes, but I think this, can I cuss or what?
Yeah,
okay, he goes, but all this stuff y'all talk about, this rodeo, he goes, that's a bunch of bullshit. Ain't no freaking rodeo. Y'all, that's bullshit. And I go, well, guess what, sir? I go, how many times you sell out your stadium for your football team? Obviously, 9, 10 times, because you got 8 regular season games and 2 preseason. I go, 10.
If you make playoffs.
Rodeo's got 20. 20. And it's over 3 weekends long. We have barbecue, we have parades, all that. 20 sellouts. That ain't no bullshit.
This ain't no redneck show.
So I said, yo, we're not a bunch of people sitting on, wooden bleachers spitting tobacco. This has an economic impact of 8 Super Bowls. We get that every year. And explained, I said, there's 17,500 free paid volunteers for the rodeo. It's the largest standing army in Harris County. And I explained all this, and he's looking at me. He turns to his guy. He had one guy there. You could tell he's an accountant, geek-looking guy. He turns to him, and he goes, I need to get me one of them fucking rodeos.
Now that is
Classic.
Classic.
Classic. Because he comes up, his first pitch is, y'all, you're full of shit.
Yep.
Freaking rodeo. That doesn't do crap. And I explained to him, and then 1 minute later, he's like, I need to get me one of them fucking
So he finds you after, and he tries to call you on your bullshit, but there's no shit to smell. Yep.
Yeah.
I love it. So rounding back to reporting and stuff like that, you got to be in you got to get lucky to get in that type of circle to fight for a team like that, and that only happens once every blue moon. So talking about meaning and identity, serving a purpose greater than reality. You've covered Tom Brady's first Super Bowl. After they promised us our first Super Bowl in 2004, you reported there. You've been to the World Series, NBA Finals. But what was your sports reporting? Where did you find meaning, and how did you get up every single day to go? Because all you just mentioned, you didn't care about Barkley's groin. So right. What got you going?
Good question. I think it gets into personal relationships too. You get to know maybe the managers of the team. Art Howe, in particular, was a manager of the Astros, former player, just a great person. And you wanted Art to do well. I wanted the local teams to do well because it brought more interest, it brought more fun, and I wasn't like a cheerleader on the air, but I wanted our teams to win if that's possible. But at the same time, you have to be fair and you have to criticize when it's warranted and valid. So what was important to me, or what did I like about it the most? I would say that when I was a kid and we had the Love You Blue Oilers, a lot of your audience probably won't remember, but we're talking about the late 70s, and the great Earl Campbell was the running back, and Dan Pastorini was the quarterback, and Bum Phillips, one of the greatest people you could ever meet ever, was our coach. There was a bond that was created between those Love You Blue Oilers and the fans, that there's been nothing like it ever. And I don't think it'll ever be recreated anywhere in the world. There are special relations that communities have with teams. There's a team in northern Spain called Atletico Bilbao. That's a special following, because only athletes born in the Bilbao region can play for Atletico Bilbao. So think of the generations that follow that team. They have to have been born in that area. And they're competing against Real Madrid, Barcelona. Oh, my gosh.
In La Liga, yes.
It's special. So that's a special, I use that as an example. But times 1,000 to that moment with the Love You Blue Oilers, it was absolutely unbelievable. And the Oilers went to Pittsburgh, got drubbed in the AFC title game. And Dickie Rosenfeld, who I worked for later on at KILT, came up with the idea, let's have a pep rally. Who's going to show up to a team that lost? 58,000 people in the dome, and about 40,000 people were outside. It was 85,000 people there to greet a team that lost.
That's a statement.
There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Next year, same thing. I was on one of the buses that was going to the dome that night. The second year, they lost to the Steelers, because I went to Pittsburgh for the game. You're talking about a following that was religious in nature, and I'm not comparing a football team to religion, but it was the most special connection that a fandom and a community could ever have with a sports team. Nothing will ever come close. Nothing.
I get you. So, I've told you a couple months back that, I see myself having passion in sports interviews, and, I can see myself thriving in that space. However, I believe it's important to think long-term growth when it comes to deciding what you want to do. And so I feel like, and I told you this, once I, maybe achieve certain athletes I've interviewed, certain teams, traveling, all this, it's only natural for anybody in any industry to ask themselves, what's next, right? And so I think the drive for continuous learning and seeking challenges your personality, your career, and what leads to fulfillment, because that's what we're all here for. So you getting out of sports reporting and transitioning into your company, Begala Consulting, where did that bridge tie together on why you left and started your own company?
Good question. There were a few things that made me think that there could be an opportunity there. I had a great relationship with Pennzoil, and they bought my sportscasts all the time, and I got to know the chairman, Mr. Pate, brilliant man, knew some of his top PR people, and they'd buy a lot of my sports casts and whatnot, so I got to know him well. And then they would also fly me up to the Indianapolis 500 during time trials. Indianapolis 500 is a whole month. You get to the Indy, you get your cars, plural, ready. You do all the practice, and then you do time trials, and then you get the best time, and then that's how they set the race, right? So time trials are a big deal. Of course, A.J. Foyt, greatest race car driver ever in the history of race car driving, anything. I worked 2 times in A.J.'s pit crew, if you can believe that. I was a water guy. Wow. So I got the privilege of working in A.J.'s pit during 2 races at the Texas World Speedway. But so the Pennzoil thing, I got to be really close with them, and I remember it was a Thursday night, about 8:30, I got a phone call. I think it's a gentleman by the name of David Webster. Great guy. He was like their head of PR. Chris, we got a problem. I was like, oh, shoot. He goes, can you hold on for Mr. Pate? Chairman of the board of Pennzoil. Sure, David. Pate gets on the phone and says, we got a huge problem. We spent a ton of money to sponsor the drag racing dealerships out there in Beaumont and whatnot. There, I think the gentleman's named Donnie Gay, the Gay family. They put all this money into this great drag strip. Great. So Pennzoil put all this money into it, and they're looking at Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They got no sales. We're about ready to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. They call me, and I go, okay, just off the cuff. And I said, these people are all grease monkeys. They love this stuff. So why don't we set up a special ticket? It gets them down into the pits, gets them in the area where the rubber burns and it literally flies in the air and sticks to your clothes. That's when I covered the drag racing.
Being in the stadium.
Yeah, that's it. So let's sell a special pit pass that gets them down there. They get to look under the hood, literally, in all the cars. Do some roping, but get them to talk a little bit. We'll put that at $185. See what we do. I'll put it on every one of my sportscasts. And remember, I'm working for KILT. We're the #1 radio station in the region. We were a monster. I was so lucky to work for Kick back then, and then KILT for almost 10 years, 9 years. It was a powerhouse. I'll put it on all my sportscasts. 32 tomorrow. Let's see what happens. Okay. Dude, we sold out the whole weekend by Friday afternoon. Mr. Pate thought I was a genius. I'd saved him $280,000. They made tons of money.
Marketing?
On the sale of the tickets.
Oh, okay.
They're going to lose the whole weekend. Okay. So we sold the special pass, and he was happier than a pig in shit. And I thought, you know what? Here's an example of doing some out-of-the-box strategic thinking. And I started to do some work with U of H and started to do a few other things. And that led me to believe, you know what? I might be just young enough and dumb enough to figure out that I could start a company that would be very strategic, not big, large employees doing annual reports and copying and all of this other kind of stuff, which is great. Big firms do that. Just being very strategic, talking to business owners and decision makers on strategic media, communication, business decisions. There's a niche there, and that's what I sought out to do, and I was real fortunate. It's exactly what I ended up doing. So I started Begala Consulting. A friend of mine was at Channel 51. He had offices there. So I had an office, a computer, and a phone. And I just sat there and stared at it for a few days. Scary as hell. Had just got married, just had a baby a couple months old. I had nothing. Nothing.
So that leads me to my next question. We understand why you made the decision to leave reporting. And you immersed in sports since you were 14. You built an incredible depth of knowledge and an experience in the industry. With that foundation, that strong foundation, how was starting your company one of the hardest things you ever achieved?
Well, it's just, it's very scary if you don't have a nest egg or if you don't have something to fall back on. Not like, my dad was there saying, go for it. I'll pay all your bills first 6 months. If this doesn't work out, we'll think of something else, or father-in-law or something like that. Rich friend, nothing. So it's scary. And you gotta have guts. And nobody ever made something of themselves or had a success without taking a risk, right? And I just thought that there was a chance there. And I was real fortunate, and it was ironic that the first big, huge projects that I took on, paying projects for my company, were sports related. They were sports meets business. Obviously, we talked about the sports referendum and all that. So that started me off, and I was fortunate there. But I guess it's just having the guts, the guts to go out there and do it. And, when I was in college, I started a little PR company. I went to the Kmart, and I went to Canon Car Care in Missouri City, Texas, right by Sugar Land. And I walked up to the owner, and I said, I go to University of Houston. You need cars. That's how you make money. You get traffic in here. And whoever drives their car in here, I knew these numbers, that if they drive in and the muffler falls off, it's over 80% chance that they'll let that person where their car is fix their muffler. So you need cars. You need traffic. I'm going to use your name. Trust me, I'm not going to misrepresent. Right. But I'm going to use your name, and we started building things that we could put on this coupon. 2 free oil changes, rotation tires, all sorts of other things. But there was good, hard things in there. And I went and I made these, I printed out all these coupons. They were less than a penny each. And I sold them for $69.95. And I'm talking door to door. Walk up to a door, knock on a door, open. Hi, I'm Chris. I represent Canon Car Care. Wham, boom, door slams. That's hard. If you can sell door to door, of course, now you probably get shot. But
I sold solar door to door.
If you can get door to door and
it's crazy.
It's the hardest.
It's the real deal. It's the rawest form of sales.
Sure. And it gets...
I love it, though.
It's hard, and it gets you a lot of experience. And I think if you have some degree of success, it gives you some confidence. So that kind of ties back in. Maybe, I always had a lot of confidence in myself and not, overboard or any big, huge ego. But you have to have confidence in yourself. You also have to be intellectually honest enough to know where your weaknesses are and where you need to improve. But starting a business, I think, had to do with thinking that there was an opportunity and a niche in high-end, straight to the top strategic communication support for decision makers and business owners. And I think it has a lot to do with, your makeup, who you are, you have confidence and whatnot. But I was, at least have enough guts to have started it. And then I was fortunate enough to be relatively successful and to be able to do exactly what I had set out to do.
So in college, you started your own company. it wasn't Begala Consulting?
No, that was I was with a guy named Greg Warner, who I waited tables at and bartended with at Bennigan's. And Greg and I started this, and heck, we did it 5 days a week, 2, 3, 4 hours a day, and on some days we'd make $70, $80. Other days $450, $550. That's a lot of money one day, 2 hours. And so that's what I did for about a year and a half, 2 years. I sold those coupons.
Did door-to-door last year in Austin. I was up in Austin selling solar, and I couldn't fathom the idea of, like, I'm selling solar, which is like $40,000, $50,000 loan, and you're going to trust me to, like you trust me. So
right.
We found a way around it, and I was networking with the UT students at the McCombs Business School, and so a gentleman named Mitch Conti, he was super good at what he did. He showed me the ropes, and he showed me the pay stabs, and I was like, yeah, I mean, just teach me your ways, and I'll go door knocking with you. So that's what we did, and I learned a tons of people skills. Learned to not fear the fear of rejection, so that's out the window. So definitely learned a lot, and I encourage anybody that wants to do anything in business, at least get a summer under your belt doing door-to-door and anything, just so you can, meet people, how naturally how they flow. So definitely encourage people to do that. So going back to the center of our focus, was your sports authority job after Begala McGrath, or was that before?
No, way before.
Way before. Okay, so
that was Begala Consulting. I started Begala Consulting on August 8th, 1997.
Okay, so was that managing the campaign for Sports Authority? Would you say that was like the climax of your narrative, the turning point of your story?
I think it was a big turning point for me. That the city of Houston and Harris County came together to put that together. And there's a guy named Mark McKinnon, is a genius, and he was good friends with my brother Paul, and he was a principal at a company called Public Strategies in Austin. And Mark ended up doing all of George W. Bush's radio, TV, and messaging for his governor races, and then both of his presidential races. And afterwards, now Mark's, big superstar. He's got a show on Showtime and this and that. Mark was like this with Lanier. Lanier wouldn't scratch his nose without calling McKinnon first. Now, I mean, let me tell you, Lanier was a genius. That doesn't mean that he wasn't capable. Right. An absolute genius, Bob Lanier. But McKinnon was that tight with him. So Lanier turns to McKinnon and says, I might take this sports thing on. This is August of 96. Nothing. This last second. And McKinnon's like, I don't want to do it, Mayor. No. So he calls me up. He goes, I'm going to act like I'm doing it, and you're going to do all the work. Like, okay. So we go into Lanier's office. Mayor Houston, Ken Lay's there. Everybody is there. We had done a poll with Mike Basilis, who's a brilliant pollster. He lays out on the poll. Mark speaks, I speak, and Lanier goes, okay, we'll do it. And then Mark would fly in like 2 times a week, and every single time anything was happening, he would just say, just tell the mayor that I said okay. Like, well, I'm going to do this TV ad. That's fine, Chris. Just tell him I said it's okay. So, of course, Mark was involved, but not as much as they knew. And it turned out that, here I am kind of running this campaign. And, yeah, that was a turning point, and it was incredible. And we won. And you would think on the back end of that I would be given the Sports Authority position. I should have been the lead consultant, sports consultant, because I passed that referendum. To the contrary, there were some dirtbag scumbags who were trying to kick me out and move me out. I had to work my fanny off to get that contract. And that contract was teeny at first. Teeny, nothing. And then in a short period of time, I was re-upped and it grew. But the board of the Sports Authority at that time was an incredibly talented group of people. The late, great Michael Stevens, who's the greatest financial numbers guy you'd ever meet in your life. God bless Michael. Billy Burge was in charge of construction. Jack Raines was toxic, and he was always in trouble, but he had a brilliant mind. He was our chairman. Carol Garner, the wife of Phil Garner, headed up community relations. I end up working with Carol there. She's a genius. Oh, yeah, she just married some baseball player. No, Carol is a phenomenal person, and nobody knows how integral she was to our success.
Could you talk about Miss Gardner calling you at Toys R Us and giving you that call? Because it seems like the theme of this interview is that you like to take a lot of risk. You like to bet on yourself especially. And so I know you mentioned they gave you undercut value and you were bold enough to take it. So can you dive into that and explain it to us?
And I had a couple of dirtbags fighting hard to get me out and not allow me to get that contract. And I end up finding out that this contract for a sports authority for public relations, community relations, is going to go through Community Relations Committee. And heading up that committee were two people. The late, great, guys, it's so terrible. I mean, there's so many people I'm mentioning that have passed. And I don't mean to be a downer on that, but these are all incredible people who led and had such great impact on our community.
That's why I'm here to understand the foundation of how Houston was built. And I think it's important.
We stand on their shoulders.
Right, and I think it's important the audience understands how it all appeared because, Houston's, top 5, top 4 city in the nation, so definitely want to understand what's going on.
These are great people. Michael Stevens, look up Michael Stevens. Look up Reverend C.L. Jackson, Pastor Jackson. He was the pastor, his son is now, at Missionary Baptist Church here in Houston. So Pastor Jackson and Carol were in charge of community relations, and I made my pitch. And I remember Pastor Jackson goes, "Let me ask you a question, son." I was like, "Yes, sir." He goes, "You got 25, 30 years experience. When did you start, when you were 5? And I was like, "Yes, sir, I actually did start when I was 5. But so the long and the short of it, I presented, and some big, huge PR companies presented, and they got that number down so low, I'm not ashamed to say, it was $2,500 a month, which is nothing. And I remember Carol Garner called me, and I was in the Toys R Us with my wife and mother-in-law, and the phone rings, and it's Carol. She goes, "Chris, I want to congratulate you. We want you to represent the Sports Authority." Wow, that's great. There's one problem, though. We're only going to start out with $2,500 a month. What do you think? And I said, "Well, Carol, you know that's way below market value. So if you and I both agree that that's below market value, I'll take it in a heartbeat. But if things work out and you're pleased, maybe in the next few months, maybe in a short period of time, we could stop and re-up." Absolutely. And that's how I got started.
Yes, sir. So I love that story. Could you share the importance of choosing risk over regret in that situation, how that experience shaped the way that you think about opportunities today, how the audience should think about opportunities today? You mentioned working for free, but getting underpaid, betting on yourself and knowing what you're capable of. Could you go over that?
Yeah, there's no real answer to that. It has to do with a lot of things, and then also just good old-fashioned luck, good fortune. You could talk to any entrepreneur, any person who started their own business, no matter who it is. Bill Gates is worth what? $200 billion. He started businesses and failed, no doubt. So I don't want to tell anybody and everybody, just go out and, kind of willy-nilly start your own business, and then 4 months later, you're on food stamps and nothing happened. The phone never rang and you never got one deal. That can happen. Developers all over the world who build buildings, build homes, software designers, whoever it is, they're the ones who take that risk. Take a strategic risk. Take a risk in an area that you think you know something about, something that you're passionate about. Persistence isn't just my favorite wine. It's the entity that is connected to success. Persistence connects to confidence, connects to hard work, all of that. So if you have those qualities and you're passionate about what you're doing, yes, give that a shot. And in the end, too, Coach Kelvin Sampson's the greatest coach in the nation.
Go Cougs.
Our Cougar basketball coach. We are so unbelievably fortunate, lucky that we have him. And he preaches this all the time, and anybody who's successful preaches it. You learn way, way more from your defeats than you do your victories. Use a baseball analogy. You make $30 million a year if you fail 7 times out of 10 in baseball. You get up and you bat 300. That means you failed 7 out of 10 times, and you're a superstar making $30-35 million a year. You learn from your failures, and that's where you learn the most. But you also have to stop and be honest. Why did I fail? Why did this not work out? And if somebody has an attitude, we're always pointing fingers, and that ancient, brilliant Greek philosopher Bum Phillips used to say, you point a finger at somebody, you got 3 pointing right back at you. I think blame and pointing fingers is a sickness. It's a vile sickness because it extracts all responsibility, does it not? I didn't do anything wrong. Oh, Joe did. He's to blame. Look at yourself. Look at the mirror. What did you do wrong? What happened that you made a mistake on that you can learn from? Everyone learns from losses way more than wins. And every entrepreneur will tell you that. So, yes, of course, go out there and take risk. But do something, take a risk in an area that you're passionate about, that you know a lot about, or your partner knows a lot about. And then timing and luck comes in too. But believe in yourself. And if you keep trying, I think most people are going to succeed. I was fortunate, and I'm not saying I'm some great success, but if it didn't work out, that would have been a real mess. No money, brand new wife, kid. That's a lot of pressure.
That's a lot on the table for sure. I want to skip forward back to owning your own company. Talk about media relation, dealing with. You mentioned you deal with a lot of crisis, high-profile litigation. You worked with Ken Lay previously, but then you also worked with him when he got indicted for Enron, the financial scandal.
Sure did.
Could you talk to us about what that work looked like when you worked with him?
Yeah, and some of the things that Begala McGrath does, obviously strategic media relations, will write speeches, tons of crisis communication. We do a lot of video work, production work, radio, TV, commercials, video, corporate videos, and media relations as well. So in relation to Ken Lay, I had obviously worked and was around Ken during the stadium referendum, and then also I did some PR work that had Enron as a client. And when Enron imploded on December 2nd, 2001, they went bankrupt. It was a sad day. It was a sad day for thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And there's a lot of folks that when you say the name Ken Lay that recoil and say he's a horrible human being, and I'm not being disrespectful. They have every right. My opinion is that Ken Lay was a darn good man, and he found himself in a situation where he had left Enron. He didn't know what was going on. That was part of his fault. He didn't know all of that was going on, but he came back and he tried to help. So long story short, when Ken got indicted, I worked for about a year or so on his defense and working with Michael Ramsey, his brilliant litigator, lead counsel, and worked with Ken and his wife Linda and their daughter Liz, brilliant attorney herself, good person. And we worked on that. And a lot of people thought that was crazy that I was working with Ken, but I believed in him. He was a good man, and I thought everybody clearly deserves a very robust and aggressive defense. And I was proud to have worked with him. And, God took him the day after 4th of July, 2000 and what was it, 2006, 7, 8, something like that. But I enjoyed it, and I think he was a good person, and I'm not ashamed in any way that I worked with Ken.
Yes, sir. And You also worked with many other people, including former President George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton. Could you also go over some of the work you did for them? I know you mentioned earlier your brother got Bill elected.
My brother Paul started a consulting business, and he partnered with a guy named James Carville, and they got together in '84. They went on an amazing run and got Wallace Wilkinson elected governor, Casey elected governor in Pennsylvania. Wilkinson was Kentucky. He got so many great victories, and Harris Wofford at the time, after they had gotten Governor Casey elected, Senator Hines died in a helicopter crash, Democrat. And when a senator leaves office or passes, the Constitution calls for the governor to appoint. Like Marco Rubio now is the Secretary of State designee. He'll be confirmed. He can't be United States Senator anymore, so the governor of Florida, DeSantis, names the replacement. So Senator Hines died in a helicopter crash, and the governor of Pennsylvania was Paul and James' client, Governor Casey, and Governor Casey tabbed an unknown academia guy by the name of Harris Wofford. Harris Wofford had worked for Kennedy back in the 60s and helped the Boys and Girls Club to get started. Harris was president of Bryn Mawr College. His name ID was 0. Good man. And Casey tells Wofford, you're going to be senator, and why don't you hire Begala and Carville? So they hire, and Paul and James run a campaign based on the forgotten middle class and health care. And President Bush 41 was the president, and he knew that that was an important precursor to his presidential campaign in 92. This is 91. So he tells Dick Thornburgh, his attorney general, you're going to go and leave the attorney general office, and you're going to go run for senator in the state of Pennsylvania. And General Thornburgh turned to the president and said, thank you very much, sir, but I'm quite happy with being your attorney general, so I'm going to stay as attorney general. Well, there's an old adage when you have a conversation with a president that you always get the last 4 words in every conversation. And those last 4 words are, yes, sir, Mr. President. So President Bush 41 said, no, Dick, I don't think you heard me correctly. You are going to go and run for senator. Yes, sir. So he goes, runs a crappy campaign. He says, I'm from Washington. I'm here to take care of you. Everything's fine. I know how to take care of you. And Paul and James ran a brilliant campaign and said, yeah, he is from Washington. That's why you're not making money. That's why things are bad. That's why you don't have health care, is because Washington has forgotten about Pennsylvania. And it was this precursor. And a guy named Bill Clinton, who was the governor of Arkansas, kept calling my brother during that campaign. The governor of Arkansas is on the phone for you, Paul. What?
I heard your speech today. It was great. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm running for president next year, and this is great. Y'all are running my campaign right now.
And Paul's like, okay. But they end up winning. It was a miraculous win. And it was the bellwether that sent a shock through D.C. and President Bush and said, oh, my gosh, we got some problems. Clinton came in, ran on forgotten middle class and health care, and ends up winning. So that was very unique in that later on I would be able to work for President Bush 41. But Paul and James get in, and President Clinton gets in, and then I was so honored to be able to do advance work and do a few things. And one of the things that I worked on that I loved the most was politicians are forever trying to connect with the lower demographic as far as age, right? Oh my gosh, get me to the 18 to 22, 18 to 24. They don't vote. They don't care. If you could somehow connect with them, you've really got, it's forever, right? I mean, every politician would kill for that lower demographic.
I feel like Trump did a good job.
He did a phenomenal job, phenomenal, best probably ever. So we came up with an idea that said, well, why don't we do a sports-related theme, and then all of a sudden it transitions into politics. We can do, why doesn't ESPN, maybe they'll go for this, we do ESPN town hall forums. And it broke, and we worked on it. It came together. We did the first one in Houston, in Wortham. We had 16 people with live mics for an hour and a half to 2 hours. I think it was an hour and a half. And President Clinton comes on with a live mic. A sitting president with 16 live mics on a stage, that'll never happen again in the rest of the history of the world. He was brilliant, and he had a lot of guts, too. So we put up, and tons of those people on that first dais were my people, like Joe Morgan, the great famous baseball player. Carl Lewis was there. I picked a whole bunch of people, and it turned out that the topic of the night was, why aren't there more African Americans in positions of manager and head coaching in professional sports? Well, you start talking sports, but then you get into politics and African American politics and how it works. So we did about 4 of those. So that's something that I worked on, and then I did advanced work with the President Clinton, and that was just, how fortunate, opportunity of a lifetime. And then Jim McGrath and I hook up together. He asked me, I need help with a bunch of real huge, big President Bush 41 projects, because Jim had been with President Bush 41 since his last year in the White House. He was asked to move to Houston to set up his office after President Bush lost the 92 campaign. And so Jim McGrath has been with him. He brings me in, and then we start doing all of these great projects. And then I got an unbelievable opportunity, and it was unbelievable. And he tabbed me the good Begala as a joke, because my brother was the bad one, right, on the other side. Yeah. He's a Democrat, and we're conservative. And lo and behold, the terrible tsunami hits, and President Bush 43, the son, puts Clinton and Bush 41 together, and then Ike hits, and then the Katrina, and then Ike, and all that. So we spent like 3 or 4 years doing all these projects and international press conferences and raising money for the tsunami and the hurricane relief, and it brought back President Bush and President Clinton. So we had a lot of fun with that, and of course I knew President Clinton, and President Bush 41 would always call him Bubba. Well, Chris, you're going to be with Bubba, but we hopefully you won't have to do too much work with him. And he was kidding, and people always ask me that. They say, I don't believe that Bush and Clinton were friends. I don't believe that's bull. Well, it was not bull. They had tremendous respect for each other. In 42, President Clinton had enormous respect for President Bush 41. And you can get emotional almost about it. It proves that these two people who fought tooth and nail for the most powerful job in the world can later come together and have respect and work together for causes that are bigger than them and raising money for tsunami and hurricane relief. And it was totally real. They loved each other, and that was really special and a lot of fun. But, to think that I had an opportunity to work with presidents like that and do those things, and I ended up meeting and working with Barack Obama as well during those hurricane relief efforts, that was special, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Yes, sir. And I've actually never heard that story. I thought that was like propaganda, to be honest with you. So to see that, and I see you getting emotional to see those two high, powerful people come together and help people for the greater good. Thank you for sharing that as well.
It was real. It really was.
And then lastly, kind of wrapping up the interview, I want to talk about, you mentioned Jim McGrath and his influence on, dealing with all these politicians. But I always like the saying, and I've always stuck with this, it's not what you do, it's who you're with. So why specifically did you decide to go with Jim McGrath and have him grow your company versus, you could have went with your brother Paul, but I guess you guys have differences. You guys are conservative, he's Democratic. So kind of explain to us how you and Mr. Jim got such a great relationship.
First of all, I'm so fortunate to have met Jim and to have worked on a few projects with him. Jim McGrath is the best writer, long-form writer that I've ever worked with. He has a special talent. He's a great person in every way. And so I'm so fortunate. But we met, I think the first time we met was during the Orlando Sanchez for mayor campaign in 2001. And I went over to President Bush's office to ask for his support. campaign asked me to go. Wow, what an honor. So I'm going over to President, and McGrath was out of town. So I met with President Bush, and, he said, what do you want? What are you here for? Explained everything we need. I can't help you. I'm not going to help that campaign. My support's not going to help. He's very, humble. And I explained to him that we are about 2-3 points off on hardcore Republicans who don't believe that those are visitor-driven taxes. And if his name and your immense standing in that conservative Republican base would come out and say these are visitor-driven taxes, it'll turn the campaign. He said, I'll do it. So I met Jim, I think, on election night. And then after that, we ran up against, we were working on the same team with Michael Berry's campaign for mayor in 2003. And then Jim says, I've got these huge, big projects with President Bush 41. I know of your work, and what if you were to come together with me and we partner and we can do these together? 41 at 80, this humongous, huge celebration, multi-city celebration. 60-70% of all Fortune 100 CEOs came there. Former president, current president, Helmut Kohl, former Chancellor of Germany, former president of Mexico. I mean, unbelievable. It was in Houston, College Station, humongous undertaking, international, press. So we worked together on that and a few other things. And the more we kind of worked together, a lot of people would say, you guys really work well together. I had my own business. Jim had his own business, CEO Communications. He wasn't looking for a partner. I wasn't looking for a partner. But we saw that I had a lot more experience on air. I was much better, let's say, on short form writing because I did 30-second minute, sportscasts and, of course, on air. He is way more talented than me on long form writing. And we thought there's some synergy there. Why don't we hang a shingle and we'll chase some business together? Well, 22 years later, we're still partners. And it's a great partnership because he wasn't looking, I wasn't looking. He's a great guy. We've never had an argument yet. And I keep kidding him. I go, I can't wait for our first argument because I'm going to unload on you.
Really? Y'all have never had an argument?
Never.
Because I was going to ask you, how do you deal with...
Is that crazy?
Yeah, no, that is insane.
No. It's just seamless, and we chase business, and we're really good at what we do, and I'm fortunate to have him as a partner, and it's just great.
I guess
very, very lucky.
It destroys my question of, oftentimes people, they have complications with people in business.
Oh, believe me, I would love to trash Jim McGrath right now.
Right.
I would love to, but I can't.
You saying that says a lot.
I can't, because he's too good of a guy. We've never had any problems. I mean, wow, it's a great partnership. And honestly, we're really good together because our talents are synergistic. He's really good in areas I'm not, and vice versa. So I'm very fortunate to have met Jim and to form that partnership.
It sounds like he's led you both to doing greater things. Last question, what is y'all's plan for the future of y'all's business?
Oh, gosh. Who knows? I think just still doing some of the same things. We've got great clients. The phone still rings, and we're lucky to get, a lot of business coming in just from word of mouth. And, there's an old saying, the blacksmith's kids eat with wooden spoons, right? And we're a marketing, public relations, media company, so you'd think we'd be really good at promoting ourselves. We're the worst promoters. We've never spent one dime on promoting or advertising for ourselves, but we've been lucky to still get, a lot of business. We've worked with some great people, unbelievable projects, presidents and CEOs and sports owners and whatnot. It's a lot of fun, and if the future holds nothing but the same as the past for the next few years, and we're still able to do this, I'll be thrilled.
Yes, sir. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, listening to Chris Begala. Thank you, Chris, for coming on the show today. It was an absolute honor to be here in person, speak with you, feel the enthusiasm, feel the energy in the room, and I will definitely be playing back these tapes. You guys should, too. Get your notebook out, write some notes, and try to seriously apply what he's telling you, what he's telling me, to your guys' career. And I feel like whatever he's telling us is also applicable to any other career outside of journalism, outside of PR, outside of social relations. So again, I really appreciate you.
My pleasure.
Thank you guys for watching.